Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. So welcome to my May and June reading wrap up. My reading wrap ups, I always put 2 months in the one video simply because I don't read too much, so doing one video per month I feel like it would just be really short, and so I put them together. So all my past ones have been 2 months together, and yeah, so this is May and June, which after saying that, surprisingly for me, I read a lot of books. I read 6 books each month. I also had one DNF, which was a lot for me because usually I just push through and try and read a book because I always try and give books a lot of chance, but this book, I will get into it later. So for both May and June, I read 6 books, which is a lot for me. I'm gonna go through them, and yeah. So the first book I finished for the month of May was The Final Gambit. If you watched my past reading wrap up, you would have seen that I finished the first 2 in this series. Now, I feel like I'm kind of like on the tail end of this being super hyped up, super popular, so I'm glad I read this. I did mainly listen to these on Audible just because it was easier at the time, because I was still had lots of uni assessments. But yeah, I really enjoyed this story. I obviously can't go too much into this book as it is the 3rd book in the series, which would be spoiling a lot, but I really liked it. I love the way it wrapped up everything. I love how we weren't just continuing on with the main mystery, or like new mysteries were kind of being brought in, but they were also solved in that. And I believe there's a 4th book coming out, and I don't know if it's like technically a 4th book to the series or if it's just another book within the series based on the brothers of this, so I could be like a prequel. I'm not too sure. I just recently heard that another book was coming out in the series, but I really liked it. I gave this one a 4 stars. Really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed the like romance. Now, it's not too romance heavy. There's obviously romance in there, but it genuinely mainly kind of focuses on the mystery and what's going on in the book. The next book I completed in the month of May was Once Upon a Broken Heart. Now, you would have seen this in part 1 of me reading my favorite booktubers 5-star reads. The part 2 of that will be coming out after this video, I promise, so you'll kind of see my books that I've read for them. Anyway, so this one was a part of that video, so you'll see more of my thoughts as I was reading this. Haley fam raves about, she loves it, and then I've seen a lot of people liking this. I think for me, I don't know if it was the time I was reading it or if it was because it was my first like full like kind of like not like low stakes fairy tale type fantasy. I did only give this one a 3.75 stars. Like I said, I don't know kind of what it was. Like, I really enjoyed it, but sometimes there would be like days where I just wouldn't have the feeling of picking it up, which obviously isn't great. But yeah, so I did enjoy it. I am going to continue on with the series. I haven't got the second one yet, and I know the 3rd one is coming out shortly, I believe. But yeah, so this is a very like fairy tale type fantasy where you've got Evangeline, who makes a deal with a fate called the Prince of Hearts, who then she has to, it's a very bad deal. But yeah, so then you kind of just go along with their story. I think I mentioned this in the reading vlog for this one, but I feel like there was like different parts of the books where it was just like completely different plot lines, and I got a little bit confused in that. And again, I don't know if it's just because I haven't really read this like fairy tale style of fantasy much before, or if it was because I would go so far in between like reading it, and like at this time when I was reading it was like very heavy assessment period, so obviously those were my main focus. The next book I completed was Every Summer After, and this one is again one of my reading booktubers 5-star reads. Now, this is coming out in part 2, so you will see more of my reactions properly in this one. I'm gonna save my star rating so you guys can see in that one, but just know I very much enjoyed it. This is a like childhood friends to lovers past present timeline in summer. I love those books. Those type of books I love. This one was written super well. Loved it. Brought out lots of emotions. For me, it was like the first book in a while that actually made me feel things, and I genuinely was almost crying at work, which again you will see. You can't really go wrong with a summer past, present, friends to lovers timeline. Like, I love it. Like Emily Henry's book, You and Me on Vacation, love it, love it. Like, it's one of my favorite Emily Henry books, which I think it's a lot of people's like least favorite, but I adored that book. The next book I completed in May was a reread of A Court of Thorns and Roses, and I did tab this one. I'm going back rereading this series and annotating it. I am filming it for you guys, so you guys will be able to see my full reread, and it will be spoiler filled. But yeah, I started this, I think, like at the beginning of March. I started it at the beginning of March, and it's just kind of taken me a while because like I'm going back and annotating it. I'm not a huge rereader, but I really want to go reread through all of Sarah's series. But now that I started that back in March, and now everyone that I follow on BookTube is also doing it, so it's lovely to see everyone's reread and they're going back through what's happening in these books. But yeah, after the reread, I gave it a 4 stars. There was definitely points that after reading the whole series, there was definitely points in here I was just like, that's definitely not as good as I remembered it being, but that's probably just because I know what happens after. And then there was also other parts of the book that stood out to me a lot more than they did in the first read, and it definitely made me understand and see characters in a way that I hadn't before, which is really good. I'm loving it. But yeah, I can't wait to continue on annotating the series. The next book I read in May was The Housemaid by Frida McFadden. I devoured this book. You would have seen that in my reading 100 pages a day for a week challenge. I love this book. I think I read it in technically 2 sittings. The first sitting I read like just 100 pages, and then the next sitting I completed the whole book, and I loved it. It was fabulous. It was so much fun. I am not a big thriller like reader, so reading this was really fun. It's definitely gotten me more into thrillers, and I've picked up a whole bunch more that I'm really excited to read. I don't know, it's just nothing that I've read before. It's nothing that I was expecting. There was like the huge like twist, and I was like, what the hell? It was amazing. So this follows Millie, who is living in her car. She's really needing a job, and she is going around. She's found someone who she can like clean the house for, and hence the housemaid. But like while she like lives there as well. She lives in like the top attic room, which was like really strange. And yeah, so she's just cleaning the house. Strange things are happening, like the wife of this family is acting really strangely. But yeah, so really good. If you haven't read it, I'd highly recommend it. I binged it. If you go watch that video, you'll see how much I raved about it. I gave this one a 5 stars. I don't think I mentioned that before, but I gave this one a 5 stars, 5-star read. Okay, and the last book I read for May, I don't think anyone's going to be surprised by this book. It is the most popular book at the moment, and that is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I think that's how you say her last name. Again, binged this book, absolutely loved it. I can't help it. It's just an amazing book. And now I've seen a few reviews that make sense as to why people didn't like the book, but I love this book so much to not care about that. If you see this, I'm currently rereading it, and like I'm gonna go in and tab it as well, so I'm really excited to do a reread of this one. But yeah, this one obviously it was a 5 stars for me. I was giggling and kicking my feet while reading it. And if you haven't seen this and you don't know what it is about, this is about Violet, whose mother is a like commander within this like school or like thing that they go to. And in this school you have like different sections. So you have like the scribes, which is like the scholars, you have healers, you have the people who don't go to the school and just go off tour, and then you have the writers. And Violet really wants to be a scribe, but her mother is forcing her to be in the writers because Violet's mother is a writer, her whole family is are writers, so she's being forced to be in a writer. But she's like she's described to be like really small, really weak. Like she's a lot smaller than a lot of other people, which gives her some massive disadvantages while in this. But she continuously proves herself and her strength, and that she is worthy to be there. And it's just amazing. The romance in this book is amazing. I loved it. Like I said, giggling and kicking my feet while reading this. And if you haven't read this, I'd highly recommend it. Okay, so now moving on to the books that I read in June. Now this month was a lot of me catching up on my mystery book reads, which you'll see. I didn't want this to happen, but they're posted pretty close together. But that's what happens when I kind of fell behind, mainly because of school, and I was so obsessed with these other books. But the first one that I read in June was The God of Small Things, which I think was April's mystery book. So like I said, it was a hot minute. Now this is a literary fiction book based in, I think, somewhere in India, I believe. I mainly listen to this through audiobook, which I really highly recommend if you do want to pick this one up, as it genuinely helped me get the full vibe. It was very eye-opening for someone who has never really traveled outside of Australia. Yeah, so I obviously have a whole reading vlog on this, which is my April mystery book video, which I will link somewhere for all of these videos that I'm mentioning. I ended up giving this one a 3 stars. It's not the usual type of thing I would read. As you've seen, this is definitely like literary fiction. Sometimes it was hard to kind of keep up with the characters of like who was who, and that's probably because I was listening to it. But yeah, it had a lot of like darker themes, so if you do go into this, I'll definitely like look up some trigger warnings. But yeah, if you want to see my full thoughts on this book, you can go check out that video. But I will say I love this cover. This cover is just beautiful. Genuinely love. The next book I completed in June was The Mysterious Society of Lady Scoundrels. Now this is just a really fun like read. There's not much to it, but again, this cover, it's an amazing cover. Love it. I listened to this one on audiobook as well, mainly. Like, I don't think I physically read this at all, but I have the physical books, and it's just a fun series. There's not much to it. It's kind of Bridgerton meets like pirates, I think, that, but it's like air pirates, because I think they have like flying houses instead of on ships. But yeah, so that's kind of the vibe. But yeah, and then you've got this like society of like these women pirates who go around, and then you've got the main character who's trying to get into this society, and then you've got the love interest as well, who I think is trying to kill her. I think he's like her assassin, but they end up falling in love, which is not really a spoiler. It's kind of sad. But yeah, again, it's there's not much to it. It's a really fun read. I ended up giving this one a 3.5 stars. So I genuinely enjoyed it, but it wasn't too much. I haven't really thought about it since reading it, but I really enjoyed it, and I'd kind of recommend the series. The next book I completed was May's mystery read, and that was Lyrial by Garth Nix. This is actually the second book in the Sabriel series, which that first book I got in January. So again, this one has a whole reading vlog on it for my mystery book of May. I really enjoyed this one. I enjoyed this one a lot more than I did the first one. I ended up giving this one a 3.5 stars. Like I said, I did really enjoy it. It's just there were a few things on it that I like kind of more deep dive into in the reading vlog of this, but like you've got 2 characters, and for like 1/3 of the book you're exploring one character, another third of the book you're exploring another character, and then you just kind of have this, and it's like only like the last like 120-ish pages where they actually meet, and you kind of actually get into what has been building up for like the past like 300 pages. Like, it is a thick book for most of it to be like build up and background knowledge. Like, nothing was solved. And so it's making me really intrigued to read the next book and see what happens to all these characters. But yeah, it was just, there wasn't much going on for how big this book is. The next book I finished in the month of June is If He Had Been With Me. Again, this is going to be part of part 2 of reading my favorite booktubers 5-star reads, so I won't go too much into this one. I won't give my star rating so I don't spoil that video for you. But yeah, I really liked it. Surprisingly, I think going into this book, I obviously had high hopes because it was, I think, Sarah's 5-star read that I picked for this one, and she raves about it. I've seen quite a few people love this book, but right before I started it, my TikTok came up with so many people who like DNF'd this book or didn't like it, gave it 2 stars or 1 star, and so I was very hesitant to go into it, and I was like, I don't know like what it's going to be for me. So it definitely made me nervous going into this book, but I did really enjoy it. I loved it. There's a few things I had to look past, which if you've read it, you'll know there's like an item that this person wears that I had to look past, and I was like, she's fine. With this book, you also jump right into the tragedy that happens at the end, so it gives this sense of like suspense of like reading throughout the book, and you're like getting so attached to these characters, and then like you're getting towards the end of the book and you're like, no, I don't want to keep, I want to keep reading because I'm so invested, but I know it's going to happen and I don't want it to happen. But yeah, but I've also seen that I think this book released in the boy's point of view will be released shortly, I think. I'm not too sure when it's being released or if it has already, but I'm interested in reading that one as well. Now, the last book I completed for the month of June was my June mystery book, which is Educated by Tara Westover. This is a memoir of Tara, who grew up being Mormon. I think she still is. I think she hasn't done that. It says at the beginning of this that this memoir is not about Mormonism or any other type of religion, and it's just her personal experience. Now, again, I'll have a whole reading vlog for this one up for you guys at some point. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. I'd highly recommend this one. I don't feel right giving it a star rating because it is such a personal memoir that she's written about her experiences. You get a lot of internal conflict with her between being who she was raised to be and who she is around her family, compared to once she kind of left her family, who she has realized she is and how she is outside of that. And so she has this internal conflict of that. I think I mentioned this in my reading vlog, but the last line, she's trying to find, like, she's looking in the mirror trying to find her younger self who was able to deal with the problem. And it goes, "That night I called on her and she didn't answer. She left me, stayed in the mirror. The decisions I made after that moment were not the ones she would have made. They were choices of a changed person, a new self. You could call this selfhood many things: transformation, metamorphosis, falsity, betrayal. I called it an education." And I just think that's such a strong, amazing way to finish off such an emotional, intense memoir of her childhood. I definitely look up trigger warnings though, because there is mention of abuse specifically between her and her brother, and it's just a lot for her to deal with. But I really enjoyed it. I loved it. It was such an eye-opening read for me as someone who is atheist and doesn't have any sort of religion or belief system at all. But I'm really glad she wrote her experience and then I was able to read it, and that my cousin picked out this book for me to read. Oh my god, I completely forgot a whole book. Okay, also in the month of June, I read The Housemaid's Secret by Frida McFadden. And again, this is kind of like the sequel to The Housemaid, so it was really interesting to see like Millie in a different setting and see how she interacts with different people and how she has like grown from this first experience that she had in the first book. And it was really good. I ended up giving it a 3.75 stars because to me it felt like it kind of followed the same, not plot, but kind of like same structure as the first one. So I kind of guessed what would happen before anything happened, because it was generally kind of the same plot structure, I think. So yeah, but if you kind of get past that, like, guessing it was kind of sad, but I still really enjoyed reading it. There was still stuff that I did not suspect myself, which was really cool, so I did enjoy that one. But yeah, so really enjoyed that. So then after reading that is when I went on to Local Women Missing, which was my DNF for the month of June. It sounded really interesting. I was reading it on Kindle Unlimited and it just kind of fell flat for me. Like, I didn't have any like urge to go and read it at times. Like, it would be there and I'm like, I should really read this book, and I just kind of wouldn't. And while I was reading it, and I'm like, I just kept thinking about different things. There was nothing really pulling me in. There was also like different like perspectives and timelines, and it was really confusing. You had the girl who went missing's point of view for like the whole first part of the book, and then you like moved on to the next part and it was like her mum from 11 years ago, the neighbor from 11 years ago, and then her younger brother from like now. And it was very jumpy and really confusing, and I just didn't vibe with how it was being told. I'm pretty sure it would have been an amazing story if I continued reading it. I just didn't like how it kind of all went. So that is today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you like seeing what I was reading for the month of May and June. I am very excited to continue on reading. I have a lot on my TBR for May and August. I hope you liked today's videos. Please comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.